What up, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Fightful Roundtable. I'm your host, Shakiel Mahjouri, hopping over doing my once-a-month duty from CBS Sports, and we are joined now by Alex Lajas doing the three-peat, basically the head of the table at this point. So happy to have you on, take off a bunch of the responsibility on my end. It's so much easier to find two extra hosts than it is to find three, so thank you for making my job easy.
You're welcome.
And yeah, just the best, just the absolute best. So we're joined today by my fellow Canadians, taking it over fresh off Forbidden Door. You probably heard the gentleman on the bottom left screaming at the top of his lungs for the entirety of Will Ospreay versus Kenny Omega. Santi, and on our right, no guesswork today. Steve, you probably saw the shorts. Guess the wrestler. One of you is amazing at it. The other one, at least how it seems.
Yo, shots fired already. We're gonna get common Steve L's in the chat real quick.
But man, a breath of fresh air in this space, dominating TikTok as well. Santi, Steve, how you doing, guys?
Doing great. That was a great introduction. I couldn't have said it any better myself. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm super excited. Always been a fan of Fightful, so it's a privilege to join you guys.
Yes. Now, you guys were very fortunate, much like I had a really bad UFC card in Vancouver. You guys were treated to what felt like a very stacked AEW Forbidden Door. So no better place to get it started. First things first, I'm curious because we kind of have a unique opportunity that Santi and Steve were in person for this event. I feel like on the surface, you know, a card like Forbidden Door is probably going to cater a little bit more to the hardcore fan than, let's say, like the average casual pro wrestling viewer. What was the atmosphere like in Toronto and Scotiabank for that card?
I'll jump on it first. You go into cities like Toronto, Montreal, Chicago, Brooklyn, and it's always going to be the hardcore fans, the hostile fans. And I think coming off of Double or Nothing, AEW really needed to perform a great pay-per-view. And I think they did it very much justice because Forbidden Door, the crowd in Toronto is going to tell you if you're not performing, if you're not putting on a good show. We've seen that with countless events. But Forbidden Door and with the Toronto crowd, the atmosphere was something I've never experienced inside Scotiabank Arena. So I was thoroughly impressed by this.
Yeah, I was actually a little bit nervous about the performance of Forbidden Door going into the drive to Toronto after seeing that they weren't able to fill the Air Canada Centre. Sorry, Scotiabank Arena. They just recently changed the name for AEW Collision. So I was a little bit skeptical because Toronto is a flag bearer city for professional wrestling. Like you need to perform here. Like you need to do well. Like Steve mentioned, you know, the Chicagos of the world, the New York cities, the Brooklyns of the world. There are specific cities where if you are coming here to plant your flag, you better perform because you will get booed out of the building if you don't perform. And Toronto is one of those cities. And I immediately felt that because I'm a giant CM Punk fan, but the vibe and the atmosphere is so electric that I was booing CM Punk and saying horrible things to CM Punk. That's how crazy and electric it was that it even turned a lifelong CM Punk fan into a, 20-minute hater.
Who have you said worse things to, CM Punk or Steve?
Yeah, Steve.
100% me.
Alex, let's start with you here as we sort of unpack Forbidden Door in its entirety. For you, how would you say the overall card compared to the 2022 installation of Forbidden Door? And I want to give last year's event a little bit of slack in the sense that, there were quite a few injuries that sort of derailed that card. But let's put that aside and let's just talk about the execution. How well do you think that AEW and New Japan did in contrast to their first efforts?
I personally thought this year's Forbidden Door was better than last year's Forbidden Door. And I feel like with this presentation and the way they executed with this Forbidden Door, I think from last year, we've got the impression that this particular pay-per-view is for the hardcore fans. And I would even say like with AEW, some new fans of AEW are possibly just new fans of wrestling in general. And if they've watched Forbidden Door last year, they probably are familiar with Okada now, or they're probably familiar with Tanahashi. I mean, let's face it, there are possibly a lot of AEW fans that started out as WWE fans and now they're following their favorites such as Adam Cole and Bryan Danielson and Saraya. And so like they are new to the New Japan, product. But I feel like this year it was presented a little bit well, because last year it kind of felt like there was just a lot of matches that were thrown together. Like the one with Jay White and Okada, like it just seemed like they were really trying to just pack everything all at once. Where with this year, it seemed like it was, for me at least, I got the impression that it was just much more laid out perfectly, right? Like Bryan Danielson versus Okada, that is a match that all hardcore fans have wanted for almost as long as they've both been wrestling, and to have Naito return even at Collision. And I was kind of hoping to see Kota Ibushi, but I know he's no longer really affiliated with New Japan. Maybe he was going to come out and save Kenny Omega versus Don Callis. Who knows? But there were a lot of really, really great matchups from this past weekend. And for me, I think this is a good leg up for AEW because starting out the show with Tanahashi and MJF, I think that was great. It's like, let's get that out of the way. This is the championship. This is the champion. We know he's the champion, but here are some other wrestlers that, half of these matches are dream matches. And we've got the second part of Will Ospreay versus Kenny Omega, and it blew the Wrestle Kingdom match out of the water. But I know that for me...
And Santi's vocal cords.
Yeah, and Santi's vocal cords as well. Exactly. But for me, like... I have to say, if there is anything to improve, really, it is just the women's match. It really just felt like an afterthought, and it felt like they were mostly relying on Mercedes Moné, and obviously she's injured and they weren't able to get her. But also Stardom had just had a pay-per-view, a huge pay-per-view the night before, and if somebody was going to fly out to Toronto, it would have been a 12-hour flight somehow, and it probably wasn't going to work out. Maybe some TJPW roster members, but it probably wasn't going to work out. But I do like the setup with Willow Nightingale, and now she's possibly going to face Julia. And again, like, whether you are a fan of New Japan, like a new fan of New Japan, because of this event or because of last year's event, I think overall it's a good improvement as a whole for both AEW and New Japan, but also just wrestling fans in general. Like sometimes a lot of the wrestling is catered to casual fans, specifically with WWE, but also with AEW too, bringing in some stars. But it's nice to have a pay-per-view where it's just like we all freaked out. Like the Final Countdown, the fact that Bryan Danielson came out to the Final Countdown, like that is a moment for a lot of people that grew up with him wrestling at Ring of Honor, but also probably have only been exposed to him in WWE. And they're like, who's this Bryan Danielson guy? I want to check back and see, it doesn't matter. And even it's a great song. It's a great song to sing along to. So yeah, I was very satisfied with the event. And again, I thought that this year was 10 times better than last year.
I do want to give a quick shout out to the women's match, Tony versus Willow, because they were put in a really tough spot in terms of like fan burnout after the 10-man tag, if I'm not mistaken. And I think they did a really great job of getting the crowd invested. Like Willow is having such a shining moment this year. And she's just such a natural, almost old school baby face that is so easy to rally behind. So props to them. I think they got that match over better than I anticipated, considering where it ended up being placed on the event. Santi, we'll go to you next. How do you feel about the overall execution of this year's show?
I think they knocked it out of the park. I got in a little bit of heat on the Twitters of the world because maybe I didn't choose my words correctly, because I said this is the greatest house show of all time. And when I meant house show, I meant more so an exhibition show, because really, like, once this is all said and done, the next day, there's very little implications in terms of the result of the matches, because they're in different brands, they're on different shows, they're in different countries, different continents. And one of the areas that I thought that the show struggled in terms of lead up was that I blinked and Forbidden Door went from a 5-match card to 14, like that. And again, that's the nature of the exhibition aspect of this, where you can just bring in people from different blocks of professional wrestling and you're still going to be excited about it. It doesn't necessarily need this giant bloodline style feud for us to get invested into it. You really can just put Tanahashi in a match and you're like, okay, all right, I'm in. All right. So for me, as mostly a WWE fan that's recently gotten into AEW, it took a little bit of getting used to accept that fact that not everything in Forbidden Door needed to have this long, elaborate storyline. The execution of the show, in-ring work, for me, it was fantastic. Probably one of the best live shows I've been to. The pacing was good. It was just too long. There's a clip of me reacting to Daniel Bryan tapping out Okada, and there's a person behind me sleeping. And that's because we were 5.5 hours into this show. So I think that there's still a little bit of kinks to work out when it comes to AEW giving, and this was also a problem in Double or Nothing, giving proper and ample screen time and in-ring time to matches, to performers, to storylines, without burning out the crowd by the end. That is my only complaint about the show, because I still really enjoyed Okada versus Bryan Danielson, but heresy. But I wasn't able to enjoy it in the same way that I enjoyed Ospreay versus Omega, where I was standing for 50 minutes and jumping for 50 minutes. I enjoyed Okada versus Bryan more like I would enjoy something like Shawshank Redemption, where I was sitting back and enjoying it. And I'm like, this is amazing, but I'm too tired to get up and scream at the top of my lungs. That's really the only complaint, because I still really like the match.
Now, before we get to Steve, because I forgot to plug it off the top, guys, especially those who maybe hopped over here on the Straight Shoot train. If you have any questions, comments, hopefully not any concerns, feel free to leave a super chat, $1, $1,000. I've got my preference, but it's all good. And we'll make sure to pull that up during the show, either live where it makes sense, maybe on the back end, but we will get to it. For example, Spencer B just wants to know, what streaming platform are y'all using? We're on StreamYard today. Very convenient. It's the same question Santi had for me when we got started. And Santi, I totally agree. Even in the comfort of my own home, I was trying to get through the show before I went to grab some very indulgent Five Guys with my cousin, because I'm like, he's going to want to break down everything that happened on this card. And I was struggling to get through Danielson, Okada. And you can't help but wonder how that match might have stuck out in your mind had it been placed earlier in the card, when maybe there was, the attention span could sort of accommodate for it. Steve, you were there too. Break it down for me. Pros, cons.
I reiterate everything Santi basically said. It was very well executed, but longevity. We had this conversation on the drive back, where we're so happy that kind of WWE, we know when you're getting a premium live event minus probably one of the big four, you're getting 3 hours and maybe 15 minutes. And they stick tight. They have the ample time. They're able to tell the full story within their max 23 minute to 27 minute match, unless it's Roman versus Drew at Clash of the Castle or something like that. But at the end of the day, like, that's one of those ones where you're privileged as a longtime WWE fan saying, okay, we know we're getting 3 hours and 15. Santi and I driving there, we're like, are we going to be getting home at like 5 a.m.? Because it's like an hour drive back, and we didn't know if the show was going to end at 1, 2, 3 because of how long AEW events run. The only other thing I can say that was a negative, I just do not understand why Ospreay Omega was placed where it was placed, because I said to Santi, I think at one point we sat down during the match right before that for Okada and Danielson. And I said, if it was anyone lesser, I would suggest leaving, because we were both spent. Like, we just looked at each other, and like 55 minutes of just standing and screaming and reacting to Kenny Omega kicking out of a one-winged angel at 1, like that kind of stuff. You're like, what is happening? So I think that's my only gripe with the entire premium live event is the placement of that one match. Driving up there, we were like, that's the main event. Like, it has to be. We know how Toronto's going to react to that. And it was just one of those ones where I'm sitting there and I'm like, I'm exhausted.
Yeah. What's funny, Steve, is that the same thing happened in Toronto in WrestleMania 18. Literally the same problem with The Rock and Hogan, and then the crowd was just too spent afterwards to appreciate what they have in front of them. The people beside me left shortly after Ospreay and Ospreay and Omega, they left. I had a lot of room, which was great. But yeah, there were people sleeping. No fault of the show. The show was awesome. It was really long.
Yeah.
We describe it in closing as sort of, Santi apparently describes it as a biggest house show of all time. I do feel like with all the promotion, Steve shaking his head over here. I do feel like with all the promo that goes into it, like, this wasn't a show that was only catered to that Toronto market. We've seen it woven into storylines on AEW programming. We saw New Japan stars cross over on AEW programming in advance. I think this year's show is a great improvement on last year's in AEW's attention to actually creating some storylines heading into this event. But I do still feel like we're halfway from really fine-tuning it. Like, for me, the matches that stood out the most were Kenny versus Will, not very much because of the in-ring product, but also because there was a story being told in the aftermath of the Wrestle Kingdom bout. They were able to tie in the ongoing feud between Don Callis and Kenny Omega. And the other match that really stood out for me, actually more than Okada versus Danielson, was the 10-man tag, because we got to see all the interplay between Eddie and John. Eddie was there for John in ways that John wasn't there for Eddie. I think that match was a perfect example of how to further execute Forbidden Kingdom next year, or Forbidden Door next year. I think there's room to grow.
100%.
Caffeine, man. I need a coffee.
Yeah, I know.
Alex sitting here. I think that's 100. I think we're really headed in the right direction. It's very exciting for what next year holds. I do want to see AEW continue to fine-tune that product. And not every single match needs it. Like, I think Danielson versus Okada speaks for itself. I think the Owen Hart Cup qualifiers make perfect sense. That's a really easy way to get a big match on that card. But I would like to see more. They're giving it enough time on programming that it should be treated as a legitimate part of the sort of storyline calendar of AEW.
Yeah. Agreed.
Right. Very quickly, guys, before we move on to Money in the Bank, I would like to know, it's been hotly debated online over these last few days. I think Bryan Danielson actually put it quite eloquently. The Tiger Driver 91. Ospreay basically spikes Kenny on his head in the closing moments of their match. Some people say it was super valuable and impactful into telling the story of that match. Others are saying it's an unnecessary risk. Bryan Danielson, during the post-fight scrum, sort of described it as, I don't like to see moves like that. They scare me. Does it add enough to the match to justify it? I don't have that answer. Maybe yes, maybe no. So I would like to get that answer from you guys. We'll start with Steve on this one, because I saw the big grin on his face. Was that move worth the cost? And the cost may be that they're fine, but
First off, I didn't see it. I saw from the angle I saw. I'm short, not like Santi, who sees over everybody.
Santi, how did the people behind you watch the show?
It sounds like a them problem. You should be asking them. I was there to enjoy myself.
The vertically challenged people were struggling behind Santi.
Just get on his shoulders. That's what you got to do, Steve. Like Jack Perry and Luchasaurus.
He would spike me in a second. He would spike me.
I'm a one-winged angel.
Yeah. And I'm not kicking out, I promise. No, personally, for what this feud is and what this storyline is, after I watched it back, because it was the first thing I did when I got home, I actually watched Kenny versus Will back when I got home that night. And I truly believe it was a tactical necessary risk. I thought for everything that these guys are going to throw at each other, especially when the third match comes, these guys have to pull everything to make this one of the greatest feuds in New Japan and AEW history. I didn't like it. It looked terrifying. Like Danielson said, it makes you uncomfortable, but for what the story is and moving forward and how to bring more eyes that these guys are doing these crazy band moves, I'm okay with it. I was okay with it.
Alex?
I was okay with it too. I agree with Steve, because when you look back to their Wrestle Kingdom match, that was a brutal match. And so they had to elevate that, right? Because everyone else, we know how Twitter is. Twitter is not a real world anyway. But with that, now there's discourse of like, was it necessary? This and that, blah, blah, blah. They're professional wrestlers and they know their bodies more than us, right? Of course, as fans, we've seen people over the years either were forced to work through an injury or have been injured so bad because they're trying to get, a good pop or whatever the case may be. But I feel like with this match, it was just taking it to the next level. And in order for them to take it to the next level, they felt that they were going to do the Tiger Driver 91. So I, like Steve, when I watched it from home. And so when I watched it, I completely cringed so hard because I was like, oh my God, he landed on his neck. And honestly, when I saw that and Kenny was being helped out of the ring, I can instantly think of when Austin was, the pile driver with Owen Hart and how he was pretty much saying like, I know I want to walk out of the ring. I don't want to be carried out. Don't bring a stretcher, this and that, blah, blah, blah. Then again, that was like the wild, wild west of wrestling and injuries and not taking care of yourself. But again, Kenny Omega has been wrestling for 20 years now. Will Ospreay has been wrestling for X amount of years, probably 20 years, not too familiar with it, but they are professional wrestlers. If they felt that, they were safe enough to perform this move, then by all means, go ahead and do it, just be safe. My one thing that I find entirely unnecessary is Bryan Danielson doing seizures in the middle of his match. That I have a huge problem with, only because there is already an invisible elephant in the room when Bryan Danielson is wrestling, because obviously we know his history with injuries and we know his history with concussions, and he does suffer from seizures. So I get a little freaked out, honestly, when I see that. But I do understand his sentiments with that move and now with his style when he's wrestling, right? Because he did mention in the scrum, if that was 20 years ago back in Ring of Honor, he would do anything and he would probably take that move. But now he's learned and he knows his body more that he cannot take it. But there's other wrestlers now that know their bodies as well and they can take it. But yeah, I don't think it was either a question of was it necessary or was it unnecessary? It's just are they good? Are they safe?
Yeah.
No injuries, no worries. Everybody's necks is good. Everybody's heads is still sitting on its place. Yes. Okay, cool. Great match.
I just want to jump onto that quick because what Alex said about the seizures, when I saw that at the arena, that took me right back to Eddie Guerrero on SmackDown.
Yeah.
And that made me really uncomfortable. So I'm more annoyed about the seizure than I am about the pile driver.
And I'm surprised that nobody else is talking about the seizures either. But again, I do understand the point of the psychology bringing that into the wrestling match, because again, there is, an invisible layer of Bryan Danielson's matches when we do watch it that, when he takes these crazy moves, when he's bleeding, gushing blood, it's like, oh my God, just please be careful. Please be careful. But it's not just him. It's when Edge wrestles. It's when Saraya wrestles. It's when anybody wrestles that we know has that deep history of their neck injuries and concussions and whatnot. But again, yeah, you were there. You probably had, both of you guys were there. So you probably had a better sense of the energy in the room when he was doing that seizure. And again, I understand the psychology of it, but I'm surprised no one is talking about that.
We should book Bryan Danielson versus Ric Flair and everyone can just
oh boy.
Santi?
No, it's interesting because I actually fall on the other side of things. So I mean, I'm a fairly logical person when it comes to these types of discussions. Like, to me, I think it's a logical conclusion to say if people are asking if it was worth it, it probably just wasn't. Because if it was worth it, it would have been such a valuable and important, monumental spot in that match that everyone would unanimously say it was worth it. I'm thinking Edge spearing Jeff Hardy from the top of the ladder. No one here just debates whether or not that spot was worth it or not, because it was such a monumental moment to make that match as historic and as legendary as it was. That Tiger Driver 91 was not the top. It wasn't the second. I'd argue it was maybe even the third pop of that match. The kick out at 1. The foot on the rope, the stadium lost its mind. There were already a lot of great story elements that were in place to demonstrate the brutality of the match, like the screwdriver. So if we're asking ourselves, was it worth it? Was this dangerous move worth it? To them, it probably was, because they're the professionals, right? Like, they know, like you said, they know their bodies. I'm not going to sit here with Cheeto dust on my chest criticizing, oh, how dare they do these really dangerous moves when I haven't been to the gym in 4 days. So would I criticize them for choosing to add that?
4 days is a generous, very generous parody of the people you're talking about.
Fair. So I wouldn't criticize them for choosing to add that as part of the match. But again, if the public discourse is asking whether it was worth it, it means that it wasn't that monumental of a moment or a spot in the match, where if we were to remove it, where we would stop saying this is one of the greatest matches we've ever seen. Because if we remove that spot, I'm still of the mind that was one of the greatest matches. It melted my freaking face, guys. It was such a good match. So I'm of the mind that if we're discussing whether it was worth it or not, yeah, I guess it probably just wasn't worth it. But let's not sit here online, when no one here has, I don't know about you guys, but I've never taken a bump and say, well, oh my goodness, high and mighty from the top of my horse, how dare thee do such an illegal, dangerous move? But, I do stick to the point where it wasn't the most vital moment of that match. So I guess it's not worth it. Again, people talk about how dangerous that move is. You think they don't know? You think they don't know how dangerous that move is? Of course they totally do. I guarantee you, out of all the spots in that match, that's probably the one that they rehearsed countless times. The only thing where I'm like, how did you do that when you're all smothered in blood and in sweat? Aren't you slippery? And don't you think, again, these are the professionals. But again, if we're talking, was it worth it? I guess it probably just wasn't then. If we have to ask. The Daniel Bryan convulsions, I'm with you. I turned to Steve. I'm like, Daniel Bryan's convulsing. Dude, Daniel Bryan's convulsing. Dude, is he okay? And then of course they worked as they worked me pretty good. Yeah. But it's not the type of work that I want to be that I want to be a part of.
No. Yeah.
I'm here all day for Will Ospreay licking Kenny Omega's blood off his arms, though. Just
the chant in the
scene. Give me all the hepatitis, guys.
Yeah, I will say one thing where that move becomes incredibly valuable is in creating public discourse after the match. Right? Here we are talking about it. The internet is talking about it. So yeah, maybe it was this brilliant marketing piece to make everyone talk about this match. But, is that the discourse that you want to have about your match? Or do you want the discourse to be, this was the best freaking match of all time? Yes. It's up for debate, I guess. You got
to look at it too, though. The two main clips that came out of that entire match was the kick out at 1 and the pile driver. That's it.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, that's the public discourse.
So that definitely helped with the AEW builds to become one of these, oh my God, must see shows. So how many times have we seen that video just cross us on Twitter? Obviously being in the Wrestleverse of Twitter. But that video, I've been scrolling all day and I've seen it easily 100 times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, free marketing. Yeah. And we can say that it was a great idea because it ended up doing well. No one got hurt, right? But what would we be here saying if he didn't land that well, right? But again, Captain Hindsight over here, it ended up good. So, I don't think it's that huge of a deal. It ended up well. Let's just enjoy the fact that it was a fantastic match.
All right, guys. I'm going to swap around the order a bit because I just want to touch on this one very quickly, and then we can dedicate the back half to WWE Money in the Bank. Shout out to good old JR on the Super Chats who says, I'd say Forbidden Door came across well on TV, top to bottom. There was so much good on the card. The four-way, Kojima Punk, the hype still stuck in my mind. Shout out to Daniel Garcia for completely. I don't even have the balls to do it, but he's fully embraced the sports entertainer inside of him.
It's so good. It's so good.
Anyone want to give it a shot?
If that's not in the video game, I want my money back. It needs to be a taunt. Like, I'm just gonna spam the taunt button and he's just gonna be like.
All right. On that note, I was very interested to see sort of how the character arc of CM Punk was going to play out following all the discourse in his return. The announcement of his Collision debut by Tony Khan got kind of a mixed crowd reaction. Obviously, a lot of love in Chicago, not so much on Collision in Canada, and holy hell, man. I don't know how much of it was love for Satoshi Kojima, how much of it was a disdain for CM Punk, but that crowd was about as anti-Punk as you can get. They even turned Santi here. Poor Santi.
I can honestly say I still don't know why we were booing him.
Oh, guys, I sat down. I missed Collision the night before. I couldn't watch it. So CM Punk comes out and I'm cheering, and then everyone's booing. I turned to the people behind me. I'm like, so I didn't get the memo. Are we booing Punk? Is that what's happening? Yeah, we freaking hate him. They didn't say freaking.
Yeah. So on that note, we kind of saw the heelish tendencies even in the 8-man tag on Collision. It was in hyperdrive against Kojima. I guess my question is not where do we think this is headed, but how do we want this to play out? Do we want CM Punk to sort of just straddle the line between face and heel, or are we moving towards, a slow burn heel turn? And is that probably what's best for business? I'm just going to open the floor on this one.
Yeah, I'll go. Coming off his promo from Collision when he returned, and obviously we can assume what's in the red bag. We're on a train line to MJF. And if MJF is given the creative freedom that he is given to virtually say anything, to combat that, Punk needs to be able to virtually say anything. So a heel Punk, I'm fine. I've always been a fan of the tweener, but if we are going to go heel MJF and we're going to get a heel version of Punk, this could be one of the most incredible promo rounds of feuds that we've ever seen. And I'm okay with this being a direct line to Punk going heel, but still feuding with MJF. I know everyone's like, oh, that doesn't make sense. It made perfect sense because it's literally excuse my French, it's the two biggest assholes in AEW going one-on-one with each other, and I'm fine with it because I know what the promos are going to deliver. Because here's the thing, Punk is slowing down in the ring, so he's got to build up somewhere else, and why not build up where you're the best on the mic, and let's just see MJF and Punk just go. And I'm big on that. So that I think it's a great way for him just to go heel, and let's see where it goes.
I agree with Steve. I would like for this to lead to a full heel run. And again, I absolutely agree with you. The promos between him and MJF, if he's able to say whatever he wants, and MJF it's going to be another viral clip that's going around on wrestling Twitter. But fascinating that, the first Collision show was in Chicago. It was definitely, he was going to come back, and it had to be in Chicago because he had to get that love, right? But they're going to start traveling. And I've always said here, it's fun because when Punk was officially back, it was the comeback tour, right? And he was traveling all over the country. And there's so many people that either have been a lifelong CM Punk fan and they've never seen him live, have, started WWE, again, probably have not seen him live, or they fell in love with his stuff while he was away from wrestling, haven't seen him live, or they haven't seen him in a while. Either way, like, people were going to be excited to see him. And Steve and Santi, you both were very excited to see him, and you guys are both fans. But once you're in that arena, a little bit of mob mentality kind of goes over you, and you have to boo, right? Because again, that's what the show is meant to be. You're cheering or you're booing. And if everybody else is booing, then it's like, oh, okay, yeah, this is part of the show. Boo, yeah, I hate you, but oh my God, please sign my stuff and be amazing and everything, you know? But that's the beauty of wrestling, you know? That is the beauty of wrestling. But I think it's going to be really fascinating to see him tour, because Toronto doesn't like CM Punk, and that's fair. But who's to say last year, if he was probably going to be in Toronto, was he going to get booed? Was he going to get cheered? Like, that's the the layer of mystery of Punk coming back, is like, what is the reception going to be for him? And if we think back to Full Gear, it was in Newark, and the Elite came back. They were saying, you know, pardon my French, fuck CM Punk chants. So they're coming back to Newark next month in July 22nd. So what's going to be the reaction with him? And Newark, tri-state area, is a huge, loud crowd, famously. So what's going to happen there? I know they're going to be going to other parts in Toronto. So I'm excited to see, in general, what it's going to be, right? Like, I think if you're coming back into a company and you just fought several individuals, which the company is named All Elite Wrestling, they are the Elite, you can't really come back as a face like, hey everybody, how's it going, blah 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 blah, here's Larry. Like, you can't really do that, you know? You got to play it up. And with him, he does a really great job doing it. He does a fantastic job. Let him roll with it. I prefer to see a heel Punk than a face Punk any day, and that's coming from somebody that I don't really have any feelings about Punk. I miss the whole era of Punk, and he's back. Yay! But like Steve said, he is slowing down in the ring. And so, you know, I'd rather see him play it up and be a heel and just, I don't know, bring back the straight edge society if you need to, whatever. But I like it, and I do hope that it does lead to a heel run.
All right, Santi, take us home on this one.
Yeah, I kind of agree with everyone here. Yeah, like, to me, like, CM Punk is wrestling royalty, because he saved wrestling for me personally as a fan in 2011, when I think wrestling was like in its doldrums.
And today is the anniversary of CM Punk's pipe bomb.
Yeah, so it's pretty appropriate. And of course, famously, CM Punk also saved the UFC. I'm sure you guys can all agree, with that amazing legendary run that he had there. Just kidding.
Santi, no.
But the
thing is, watching the highlights yesterday.
No, the very, I bet it was totally unintentional, but it's so difficult to figure out where to take Punk, because we've only seen him in the two places that are gonna for sure have extreme feelings on him one way or the other. Chicago, he can kick a puppy in front of Chicago and they'd still root for CM Punk. And then in Toronto, he could cure every disease and everyone would still be booing CM Punk. Like, it's just the two extremes. It was just going to happen. What happens if they go to Raleigh, North Carolina? Like, what happens there? What happens in Jacksonville? I genuinely don't know. And that's what's going to make this it's got my eyes glued to it. Whatever they do with CM Punk is going to work, in my opinion, because I think he's a very good, I don't think he's a good, like, traditional babyface. I think he's that good Austin Tweener babyface, but he's a fantastic heel. I prefer heel CM Punk all day, every day. But I think at this stage, like, when we look at the Collision roster specifically, like, if that's what they're going to be building around them, does Collision have a strong enough baby face to be that polar opposite of the CM Punk? Because we also don't have a proper identity to Collision yet. It's still very much in its infancy stage. And I think the identity of Collision is going to be very vital in terms of determining where to take CM Punk. So we'll see. I think it could be very interesting. Maybe we end up getting a Dynamite fans and Collision fans. That would be kind of cool. Like where now the AEW fandom is now like picking sides. I think that'd be pretty cool. But yeah, I don't know where they're going to take this because again, like our barometer of CM Punk temperature, like we've only gotten the two extremes. So I don't know, like go put them in Wyoming. What's the reaction going to be there from the 5 people that live there? I'd be very curious.
Now, go on, Sid.
Oh, no. What I was going to say is like with what Santi said about his UFC run, I believe during the match, I yelled out, "You're performing like you did in the UFC." And I got a slight head turn from him. And I don't know why I said it because I love Punk. But like that just shows like that mob mentality that Santi was talking about. Like I don't dislike Punk, but for 20 some odd minutes while Punk was out in Toronto, I disliked Punk as more than I disliked John Cena, and that says something.
Yeah.
Now, guys, before we finish up on Money in the Bank, all the way in London, if you are one of those 5 people living in Wyoming or anywhere else on this planet Earth, you might need a little NordVPN in your life. Let's go to Sean Ross Sapp.
NordVPN.com/Fightful. Block online trackers, annoying pop-up ads, unlock geo-blocked content. Maybe you missed the WWE Network. Maybe you want that AEW Plus. Maybe you want to subscribe to overseas services so you can get UFC pay-per-views at a reduced rate. Well, NordVPN.com/Fightful allows you to do that, and you can do it with 4 months for free with that link. Not only that, you get your 30-day money-back guarantee as well, just in case you don't like it for any reason. It works on all of your devices, so you can do this stuff wherever you are. Maybe you're on that unsecured Wi-Fi at the airport, the hotel. Yeah, it can be dangerous. Your info is at risk, but you can still gain access to all that stuff. Check out all of your favorite shows or maybe shows you haven't discovered before with NordVPN.com/Fightful. Now with multiple tiers so you can get whatever services that you want. NordVPN.com/Fightful.
SRS, one of a kind. Guys, we are running a little short on time, so we're going to have to truncate Money in the Bank. Let's start with the men's ladder match, and then we'll finish up on the women's ladder match. I think for most people, there are 2 leading candidates to take home that briefcase. LA Knight, and I still can't believe I'm saying it, Logan Paul.
Say it loud and proud.
No.
Logan Paul.
Yes.
There we go.
Stop.
I feel like we're split here. Guys, I want 2 things from you. First, your prediction, first who you think should win the men's Money in the Bank ladder match. And secondarily, if you're Santi and you're picking Logan Paul, how do we get LA Knight in a strong position after the fact? Let's start with Alex on this one.
Why would you ever want to see Logan Paul succeed anywhere? Jeez. I'm never coming
It's
back
the
to
reality
this show
we're
ever
living in,
again.
Alex.
I'm never coming back to the show ever again until you ask me. I mean, I say yes.
Until the last month of July, right?
Yes, exactly. I really do think that LA Knight needs to win. I mean, he's so hot. You have to capitalize on that. And so, yeah, I just think LA Knight should win. I absolutely don't think Logan Paul should win. Although, I guess, it would be interesting to see him like dip in every now and then, like, whoo-hoo, I got the Money in the Bank, and then he actually doesn't do it, and then he does it, and then he fails. That would be amazing. But if there's anyone else that I could pick for the Money in the Bank other than LA Knight, I mean, I would love to see a resurrection of Shinsuke Nakamura in WWE. I think that would be really cool to see him have the Money in the Bank. And yeah, I would love to see that, but absolutely not Logan Paul at all. I don't
Santi?
want it.
First, I want to say, like, this is such an intriguing Money in the Bank match. Like, it for the first time, this is a star-making match for sure. None of these fellas have ever been at the top of the card consistently. They've never won world championships. This is what we want out of Money in the Bank. And look, I'm gonna play Jekyll and Hyde here. Who should win LA Knight? Yeah, of course. Come on. He's the right choice. But look, the Logan Paul winning just creates such a fun scenario. And I've explained this to Steve. He instantly becomes the boogeyman of the WWE, where at any moment, your darling puts on a 25-minute match, finally dethrones the tribal chief Roman Reigns, beats Seth Rollins. And you can't celebrate until the credits roll, because in the back of your head, you're always thinking the boogeyman Logan Paul could come down and crush my soul, crush my heart, and take that belt to Impulsive. It just, to me, just creates cinema. Cinema is what it creates, but LA Knight is who I want to win. Yeah.
Is there enough, Steve? Because I saw you shaking your head when I brought up Logan. Is there enough value in Logan Paul running around Impulsive and all these different media appearances with the Money in the Bank briefcase to just, from a business point of view, you just have to kind of do it?
From a business sense, it makes complete sense. Logan Paul and it took a long time for me to swallow my pride and agree with Santi on this. From a business sense, 100% Logan Paul being in WWE, bringing millions of people that might not have grown up on pro wrestling like we all did, and bringing new eyes, bringing new value, bringing new merch sales, pay-per-view or network buys, that kind of thing. Yes. Okay. Logan Paul, there is value in Logan Paul. Now let's get to Money in the Bank. Money in the Bank. I'm going, as much as I want it to be LA Knight. I think Santi and I have both been saying LA Knight for over 6-7 months now. We were talking about this in November. But I'm going with my dark horse. I'm going with Damian Priest, because I've been playing with this scenario that we are in the UK. We are at Money in the Bank, this new version of Balor. And we've seen this little tension between Priest and Balor. And I'm making the call now. Finn wins the world title at Money in the Bank, and Damian Priest cashes in. And there goes the feud of the Judgment Day.
So I don't want to give away too much, because Cultaholic, I love you guys, but you said too much in a tweet. Apparently, there's a report that WWE is planning a major upset. We know they're high on the Judgment Day right now. I love that idea. I hate that for Seth Rollins so much, because this world title run was supposed to be the culmination of him putting everybody else in the company over. But man, Finn is overdue for his moment.
Yeah.
I love all of that. What do we do with LA Knight if he doesn't win on Saturday night? Like, how do we start? Because there has to be a reward for him at the end of all this. He's too hot. The fans are way too behind him. I think you can get around him losing the Money in the Bank ladder match briefcase, but like, what do you do to give him a push up the division after this Saturday?
It's going to be difficult. I think a lot of people are married now to the idea of LA Knight winning Money in the Bank. I think it's going to be across the board disappointment if he doesn't win. But if you haven't been disappointed by WWE booking decisions, are you new here? Where have you been? But, I could definitely see them maybe doing some sort of tournament. Number one contender goes on to SummerSlam. LA Knight wins, and then Logan Paul comes out, cashes in the Money in the Bank. Like I told you, Logan Paul winning leads to the heartbreak that is inevitable. And what better heartbreak than giving the title to the guy that everybody wants, LA Knight, only for the guy that nobody wants to take the title away from him seconds later. I'm telling you, cinema.
No.
Guys, just if you have a super chat you want to get in, we're rolling through the last minutes of the show, so make sure you get that in. I do want to make, as I'm thinking through this, one amendment to Steve's storyline here. I would love, just because the Judgment Day I feel is clicking like they never have before, I would love to do a slow burn on that cash in where we see Finn getting sort of more and more, what's the word I'm looking for as my caffeine-less brain starts, more and more sort of conspiratorial about Damian's intentions. I feel like there's a slow burn breakup we could really do with him getting sort of on edge, maybe leaning more on JD and fostering that relationship. I feel like that's a story you could tell over a long period of time. The women's Money in the Bank, we can't leave them hanging. There are 2 of these ladder matches on the show. Is this the Io Sky show? Because that's how it feels for me.
It is the Io Sky show, but I'm going again against the grain with everyone else. I'm going with Zelina Vega because
I would be thrilled. I would be thrilled.
she's performed incredibly over the past 6 months because she was thrown into this situation with the LWO where the LWO literally didn't get a win for 4 months when they got put together. And then finally you saw the reaction she obviously got in Puerto Rico. Her mic skills have improved tremendously. She was spitting fire on Monday Night Raw. So I'm going with Zelina Vega, even though it is the Io Sky show like everyone else has been saying. I'm going with Zelina Vega. I'll get myself right out of the way.
Alex, Santi, Alex.
I like the idea of Zelina Vega winning because, like what Santi says, is the Money in the Bank should be a star making match, and I think with Zelina Vega that could be possible. I mean, she's already up in the rise, and she's so underrated, and possibly the dark horse going into this match, maybe. But I would like to see it. I would like to see Io Sky win too, but I think it would be cool if somehow Io Sky is like reaching up on the top of the ladder, nobody's in sight, and she's going to get it, and somehow Bailey continues to get in her way.
Yeah.
And then maybe Bailey wins it, and then again there's the you know, the stress that we've been seeing in the damage control as of lately. But I would not be mad also to live in a world where Trish Stratus has the Money in the Bank. I would not be too mad about it. Like, again, she's good at what she does. She's a legend for a reason, right? And so even if she breaks into both shows, sorry, brain fart. Even if she breaks into both like Monday Night Raw and SmackDown, like to have Trish Stratus maybe like holding up the Money in the Bank in front of Charlotte right now, you know, like something of that. Or not Charlotte, sorry, Asuka. Does she have the belt? Oh my gosh, I can't even keep up. Asuka, there you go. Oh my gosh, sorry, Asuka. The brain fart is still happening. But either way, I am excited to see the women's match. But again, I feel like it's very different compared to the men's match. Again, like the men's match, it does have a lot of stars that have not been world champions, but in the women's match, there are. So yeah, I'm excited to see where it goes. But I think I would be happy with anyone really winning the women's, almost anyone winning the women's.
Well, one name we didn't mention so far here is Zoe Stark. I could almost envision a sort of Christian Cage Luchasaurus-esque situation where you have Zoe as the Money in the Bank winner, but sort of Trish is sort of spotlighting as the one who deserves it. So I feel like there's some parallels we could draw there with our Canadians.
That's actually fascinating because what my one complaint about Trish Stratus winning is she doesn't need it. She's already a Hall of Famer. But if we're doing that, then it's not a star-making opportunity for Trish. Like we're making a star out of Zoe Stark. I think that's actually brilliant. But yeah, like for me, yeah, I think that's brilliant. For me though, like I think my de facto choice is Io Sky. I just think that she just makes a lot of sense. I think she is one nudge away from being a bona fide main eventer. While people like Zoe Stark, I think needs a little bit more, do still need a little bit more work. Zelina Vega is a very interesting choice because I still think WWE as a Latino is still treading water, trying to find that Latino superstar to represent them in the Latin American market. And they're trying really hard with Santos Escobar, and it's not working with Santos Escobar. I think that they've had it under their nose their entire time, that it's actually Zelina Vega that can be that mega star in the Latin American world alongside Damian Priest. But I love that choice. What I want out of this, though, is I want a true Miss Money in the Bank reign. They're very cheap with the Miss Money in the Bank briefcase where they just cash in the next day in a week, right? Like let's let them have that Dolph Ziggler reign where it's like time's ticking, it's running out. You only have so many opportunities left. Let them be Miss Money in the Bank rather than just using it as a quick vehicle to give them the title. I want to see the Money in the Bank briefcase create a character out of somebody and help them develop and go to the top of the main event.
Yeah, that worked with Carmella, right? Like Carmella, nobody really saw her as a threat. She held on to that briefcase for a while, and then she cashed in the night after WrestleMania against Charlotte, who just beat Asuka's streak. Like, that was a huge, huge deal. So I agree. I would like to see someone hold it on for a while. And I think if that's the case, building up a character and building up a little bit more hype on them, Zelina Vega would probably be the best choice for that scenario.
It also brings a little bit of credibility to the LWO because, like, it's such a jobber faction right now. And we've seen how much of an influence that they're, hey, look at that. There we go. It's Jobber Steve signing on. Hey, well, just like I feel like Rhea Ripley played such a big role in sort of the reinvention of Judgment Day and sort of bringing credibility to that group. I feel like Zelina Vega and Steve, who according to the chat has been taking a lot of common Steve W's today, I think we could make it happen. So you know what? You guys have sold me on Zelina Vega. Guys, we're about out of time, so I want to give everyone the chance to plug away. I'll get my part out of the way. Guys, thanks so much for checking it out, for having me, for tolerating me back. Your once-a-month dose of the Fightful Roundtable. You can check all my wrestling content over at Shaq Wrestling on YouTube, as well as CBS Sports. Sorry, it's been a little slow with the interviews. Nature of the beats, it can't be helped. But if you're one of the few MMA fans, no shortage of that content. Interviews this week with the UFC Fight Night headliners. There's stuff with the pay-per-view stars. Every week you can count on main event, co-main event guys over on that channel. Got a video of Sean Strickland coming out today, for better or for worse. Alex, I want to throw the baton over to you.
Yes, you can follow me at Queen of the Ring right there on Twitter, youtube.com/Queen of the Ring Wrestling. I usually do Dark Side of the Ring watch along. So if you need someone to watch that with you and cry and go through the very dark, sad moments of that show, I'm your gal, so come through. Also, twitch.tv/Queen of the Ring. We have fun there and we watch wrestling all the time. And we also watch Ms. and Mrs. because it's the best reality show of all time. And also, if you want to get to know more Joshi wrestling, it's a big time for Joshi as well. You can follow Church of Joshi everywhere on Instagram and Twitter. And we also are on Twitch. That's where we air our shows every Sunday, 12 p.m. Eastern time.
Santi, Steve, I don't know how you guys like to do this.
I'll go first. You can check us out together as a group, as part of the Straight Shoot podcast on YouTube. Straight Shoot, a wrestling podcast. You can also find us on TikTok with the same handle, Straight Shoot, a wrestling podcast. We discuss and dissect wrestling as it happens in the moment, for the moment. And we also like to play a lot of wrestling trivia quizzes. So if you want, some of the serious wrestling discussion, but also some of the lighthearted fun that should be enjoyed with professional wrestling as well. Like, let's not forget that Mae Young once gave birth to a hand. All right. It's not always that serious. You can
that
come
made
check
its
out
WrestleMania debut with Sami Zayn and Johnny Knoxville.
Yeah. I think I just turned old enough to drink, by the way. Straight Shooter Wrestling Podcast. My personal handles, you can find me on youtube.com/Mr. Santi Zapp, as well as same handle on TikTok. And then you can find me over on Twitch, twitch.tv/Santi Zapp for wrestling content, whether it's watch-alongs, WWE 2K, the upcoming AEW Fight Forever. If you're a wrestling fan, it's a great Twitch channel to go check out. Give it a chance. Steve?
And I'll reiterate what Santi said. Straight Shoot platforms across YouTube and TikTok, and obviously our Twitter is moving as well. We have somebody running our Instagram as well at Straight Shoot PC. On my stuff at Mr. Teshk, YouTube channel starts next week finally, and at twitch.tv/Mr. Teshk. Yeah, guys, just come out. It's great wrestling content across the board. Santi and I on our platform act like complete idiots. Lot of common Steve L's everywhere, and we've got some really interesting content coming up for SummerSlam, which I'm really looking forward to show. It'll be a new breath of fresh air in the wrestling community, so I'm looking forward to dropping that
for sure.
Stuff.
His YouTube channel has been coming longer than Veer. Well, that's the vibe of our podcast, by the way. You got a little taste of it.
Yeah.
Well, I wish I could end it there, but we do have to give a salute to Sean Ross Sapp and the wonderful team over at Fightful for hosting us. You haven't already. Maybe you joined Santi and Steve on this week's show. Maybe you followed Alex over on the train. Please hit subscribe, tap that notification bell. Lots of content every day coming out of those guys. We will see you back on a roundtable end of July. Until then, enjoy all the pro wrestling out there. Don't take it too seriously, and have a great week. Peace.